Hey man, what you up to?
I'm just beating in my Halo Destroyer.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm over here tending the garden. I think we should make another episode of Forgotten Molds for the channel.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to shoot another episode. What disc manufacturer were you thinking about covering this time?
Well, we could talk about when we meet up. Where are you at?
My location, I am currently at 120 degrees longitude, and latitude, I'm at 64 degrees.
All right, sounds good. See you in a bit. Latitude 64. Hey, wait a minute.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Forgotten Molds. I'm Brendan Miller, and this is Isaiah Miller, and we're super excited today to be taking a look at Latitude 64. That's right, we're staying in the Trilogy family. We have 5 molds right here, courtesy of 1010 Discs. Again, shout out to them.
I want to give a shout out to all the people that watched our first video and subscribed. That really means a lot to us, and we're really excited to see how these discs fly.
Let's go. I want to take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of this video, 1010 Disc. They're an awesome retailer, and they have supported us from the very beginning, which I'm super thankful for. They sent us out all of the molds featured in today's video. They have a fantastic website. One of the things I love about their website is the fact that you're actually able to see the profile of the discs that you're buying, which is super helpful. They have a wide range of manufacturers on their website, as well as used discs. They have great customer service, and they're just super awesome people, super nice and generous. Again, they've sponsored our first 2 videos on the channel, and I can't thank them enough for helping us make these videos a reality. Again, check them out, 1010discs.com. If you want to purchase any of the discs featured in this video, do it through them. You will not be disappointed. Thanks again to 1010 Discs. Now let's take a look at some molds. The first disc we're going to look at is the Latitude 64 Fury. This is a disc that I was excited to get my hands on because it looked like a really fun 9-speed. It has a speed of 9, glide of 6, turn of 2, and a fade of 2. Now, the first thing that I can say about this disc is that it is very understable. Just looking at the profile, you can see there's quite a bit of dome on this disc, and it has a very low parting line. This particular disc is in their optoplastic, and I love the optoplastic from Latitude 64. I think it's got a great feel in the hand, a little bit of give, not too gummy for what I like to throw. So how does this disc fly? Well, on a backhand, you can just pop this thing on a little bit of hyzer. It's gonna flip up and turn and burn and get some nice glide, and you can honestly get some really good distance out of this disc. Now, myself being a lefty and throwing a lot of sidearms, I was interested to see how this disc would throw when I threw it with the sidearm, and I have to say, as far as the grip goes with the sidearm, this disc doesn't feel super comfortable in my hand. I think that's just because of the low parting line and how much dome is on this disc. I prefer generally flatter discs for the sidearm, but nevertheless, I was able to get a couple of really nice throws out of this disc. I could basically start it off on a lot of hyzer, give it some height, it would pop up and just turn and burn, and again, like I said, have a lot of glide. So this is a very fun disc to throw. Backhand, again, this is a very user-friendly beginner disc. It's going to be something you're going to be able to hyzer flip with ease and get some really nice distance. So I honestly kind of like this Fury. I initially wasn't super impressed with it, but the more I threw it, the more it grew on me just because it's a fun disc to throw. If you like throwing understable discs, or if you have a lower arm speed and you're looking for a disc that you can hyzer flip, I recommend checking out the Fury.
All right, guys, second disc in the lineup is the Latitude 64 Anchor. This disc is pretty unique. It's got a speed of 5, a glide of 4, a turn of 0, and a fade of 3, which I would say those numbers are pretty accurate. This is in the Opto Moonshine plastic, and I think it's a glow plastic, so that's awesome. The disc, just from feel, feels pretty good for a backhand player. It's got a really flat profile, as you can see. Even for a sidearm, I could definitely see myself using this for a sidearm as well. I've never heard of this disc before, and I was quite surprised by the flight. The rim is quite unique. It looks a little bit like a rock and a shark combined into one, and it flies quite overstable. This disc on a backhand is basically the equivalent of a zone, just a little faster. This thing could go out to about 270 for me on a straight to hyzer finish, and this thing is a complete brick. I would trust this in quite a headwind, and it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to go out and it's going to fade. For me, I would use this disc for just those 200-foot spike hyzers with a mid-range. I think this would be a great fit for that. Yeah, I threw this disc on a couple max power drives, and this thing had no sign of flipping whatsoever. Despite it being this overstable, it will get more distance than a zone or like an anvil, just because it's a little bit of faster profile. Yeah, my brother threw this thing on a couple sidearms, and it handles torque very, very well. He was doing some flex shots with this and headwinds and stuff, and it had plenty of integrity at the end of its flight. My brother actually is going to bag this disc just to have something that's really overstable that goes a little bit farther than his anvils.
The next disc in the lineup is the Latitude 64 Striker. Now, I have never heard of this disc before, so when I got it, I was very interested to see what the flight is like. The numbers are as follows: a speed of 8, which is a little bit unique. You don't see a lot of 8 speeds, glide of 5, turn of 0, and a fade of 2. And I would say, again, those numbers are fairly accurate. One thing that's unique about this disc is the actual rim shape. It does have a fairly high parting line, and the rim shape is just a little bit different. It doesn't look as aggressive as something like a Firebird or a Raptor. It's got more of a smoother rim, even though the parting line is rather high. This disc is in the Opto Ice plastic, which usually means that the disc is going to have a little more of an overstable flight. And that was the case with this disc. I have to say, I threw this disc primarily on a forehand, and I actually really liked it. It has a nice overstable finish, but you're actually able to get a little bit of distance at it, especially if you put a little bit of Annie on this disc. You can get some really nice shot shapes with it. And the thing, again, that I love about this disc is that it handles torque very, very well. I was able to really rip into this disc with a little bit of Annie, and it would kind of just hold over really gently and still come back at the end. It didn't have a lot of movement left, which is really cool. It just kind of held that Anheuser line and then finished with a nice little bit of fade. Now, as far as the amount of fade that this disc has, it does not have as much fade as something like a Firebird or a Raptor. I would say this disc has more of a finish like an Eagle or even a Thunderbird, a little bit more of a mellow finish, but still, it's got a nice bite at the end. My brother threw this on some backhand drives, and he really hammered it, and if he hammered it really hard, he could get it to actually fly straight for like 340 feet before it actually hyzered. For me though, I have to add a little bit of anhyzer in order to get that straight flight. If I rip this thing flat, it's gonna go straight for a little bit, but then it's also gonna dump. So primarily, I'm throwing this disc with just a little bit of Annie out of the hand, and it was doing some really nice work. I was able to push this disc 330 feet with a little bit of anhyzer on a forehand, even into a little bit of a headwind, and it held up really, really well. Very, very fun disc. Again, a little bit torque resistant. It's got some overstability, but it's more of a workable overstability. It's not a brick. Latitude 64 Striker, very fun disc, very cool. If you're looking for something that's gonna have some overstability, but you can still push straight, check out the Striker.
All right, guys, fourth disc in the lineup is the Latitude 64 Bolt. This disc has a speed of 13, a glide of 6, a turn of -2, and a fade of 3. Now this disc is in the Opto plastic. It's got a pretty unique rim, pretty fast, 13, it's about what you expect, but a lot of dome for a 13. It's got a pretty average parting line. For me, the flight of this disc was pretty unique. I'm not a huge fan of it, for me personally. For me, I would throw it about 50% power, and it wouldn't turn at all, not even a chance of it turning for me. And then once I got to like 80% power, like for those 450-foot shots, this thing became a roller. It took me a little bit to figure this disc out, but once I got a hold of it, I got one to about 450 in a bit of a headwind. I had to really just throw it on some hyzer and trust the turn, and it went pretty far. I would say the turn at a higher arm speed would be like a 3, maybe even a 4 for those big arm players. So I might bag it just for a roller in my bag. I'm missing an understable distance driver in my bag, so this might make it just for that purpose. But yeah, my brother has a lower arm speed with the sidearm, so he can give you the thoughts on this disc with the sidearm.
Thanks, Isaiah, for roasting my arm speed. But yes, I have a slightly lower arm speed than my brother. No, quite a bit lower. And I threw this disc for forehand and some backhands, and I have some thoughts that maybe differ a little bit from Isaiah. So, on the forehand, I found this disc to be fairly usable. I was able to crush it pretty hard, flip it up to flat, and then it actually had a nice overstable finish. I was expecting this disc to be a lot flippier out of the bag, but it seemed to have some decent stability. Now, I must admit, I had a little bit of trouble throwing this disc as well. However, I was able to kind of figure it out a little bit, and I got some really nice flights out of it where I'd smack it with the forehand, it would flip up, turn a little bit, and then come back with a decent amount of finish. Now, one thing I will say about this disc is that it has a ton of glide. This is an interesting disc. I'm not, again, a huge fan of it, like my brother mentioned. It seemed a little bit unpredictable, whereas sometimes it would just kind of hyzer out on me, and other times it would pop way over. So maybe I just need to spend more time with it, but overall, I'd say the disc is decent. You can definitely, if you have the power, throw this thing really high and get some big turnover lines like my brother demonstrated. So the Latitude 64 Bolt, interesting disc. The last disc we're gonna talk about is a Latitude 64 Spike. This disc instantly captured my imagination. It is very, very unique. The first thing you'll notice about this disc is it has these little pads on top that are supposed to add a little bit of extra grip. I don't use those at all. I think they're kind of weird, but nevertheless, they're there. The Cenis, I think, also has these kind of grip pads on the top. The most interesting thing about this disc is the profile. This disc has a profile that kind of resembles a Zone, except it is a lot shallower. This disc has a very thin profile, a shallow profile, and in my hands, it honestly just feels like a shallower Zone, which I think feels amazing, especially for my forehands. So this particular one right here is board flat on top with actually a little bit of puddle to it. And the flight numbers on this disc are a 4, 3, -1, and a fade of 1, which is interesting. This is a 4-speed disc, but again, it's kind of got that Zone profile. I would say it's probably a little bit more streamlined than a Zone, which would probably give it that 4 speed. So let's talk about the flight of this disc. This disc is very, very interesting when it comes to the flight. I would describe it as a really nice straight disc. However, the cool thing about this disc is that it also handles a little bit of torque. So I threw a lot of forehands with it, especially when we first got it and it was fresh out of the box. And I could pop it pretty hard flat and it would just go dead straight and then have a little bit of finish at the end. Again, the biggest thing that I like about this disc is the feel in the hand. It's got a really nice, comfortable feel in the hand, especially for my sidearm. And this disc is a fun disc for those touch putter shots. Very, very cool disc. I am definitely gonna bag this thing. Latitude 64, please make a premium plastic version of this disc. I would buy like 5 of them. I have to say, I've never really seen a disc quite like this, and I absolutely love it.
The backhand, the flight of this disc, very unique. It's got the Zone profile, like Brendy already said. So this disc doesn't have a whole lot of glide. Kind of a Berg effect to this thing, if you will. I've done this thing on some max power shots, give it some height, and it just drops out of the air at the end of its flight. As far as just throwing around little chip shots and stuff, I love this thing for backhands. It feels super comfortable. This thing is super versatile. I can make it do whatever I want. It says putt and approach on it, so I did some putting with it, and I have to say, didn't hate it. I wasn't sure how I'd feel with the Zone profile putt feel or whatever in these pads, but everything felt decent. It's got a pretty straight putt with some integrity at the end of it, so like those 80 footers, it will hyzer at the end of its flight, or the end of its putt moreover. And I really enjoyed putting with it. For people who like the idea of a Zone but don't like the feel of a Zone, I recommend the Spike. This thing, it's gonna fly a little straighter for you, but it's gonna have some fade there at the end. And I would really recommend looking at the Spike.
So guys, there you go. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Forgotten Molds. Again, thanks to 1010 Discs for sponsoring this video. Check them out in the link in the video description. I have to say, I think me and Isaiah both found the Spike to be our favorite disc out of the whole lineup. It's a super cool disc. Again, check it out, 1010discs.com. And let us know down in the comments below what manufacturer you want us to take a look at next.
This is Isaiah and Brendan signing off.
See ya.
Prince. That's in the water.
What? Is that water?